What's the most disturbing secret you've never told anyone? Story 1. There's someone on my Facebook who has been lying about her father dying of cancer while claiming her eldest daughter, an 8-year-old, is fighting a brain tumor. It's all completely false. Her father is alive and well, and her daughter is perfectly healthy. One of the pictures she used as proof is actually from when her daughter was in the hospital for observation after a minor fall. She manages this by maintaining two Facebook profiles, one for family and close friends, and another for old school friends, acquaintances, and people she dates. The lies are rampant, but these two stand out because I know with absolute certainty that they're fabricated. I tried to confront her about it last year. She denied everything and even showed fake screenshot messages with her sister as proof. I knew it was nonsense because I had already spoken to her mom, who confirmed her father was alive. When I shared screenshots of her post with her mom, she was stunned but didn't respond. When I messaged the liar to confront her with this information, she blocked me immediately without any explanation. As far as I know, she's still lying about all of it. She's also claimed to have had multiple miscarriages, cervical cancer, and other tragedies. I'm completely blocked from all her socials now, so I can't confirm if she's still at it. However, I've considered reaching out to local professionals to ensure her kids are safe. It's troubling to think her lies could escalate to a point where they might put her children in danger. I regret not addressing this aspect sooner. So to Natalie S., if by some chance you see this, stop being an attention-seeking liar and get the help you need. Story 2. Once during undergrad, I got blackout drunk. When I came to, I was vomiting all over myself. A friend drove me to his apartment, and since I was covered in vomit, I took off all my clothes and immediately jumped into his bed. I was barely lucid. When I woke up, I realized my friend was having us with me. I was conscious enough to call him by another name, hoping it would throw him off and make him stop. But he didn't stop. He just kept kissing me and pushing into me. I've only ever told one person about this. Even now, I struggle with how much I can blame myself for putting myself in that position. Edit. I really appreciate the kind words and shared experiences from others, but I still feel like I bear some responsibility for what happened. I drank heavily, blacked out, stripped off my clothes, and got into another man's bed. While I never said yes, I can understand how someone might interpret my actions as consent. That being said, I firmly believe women and men always have the right to say no. Alcohol doesn't excuse someone's behavior, and taking advantage of someone in a vulnerable state is inexcusable. I still believe what he did was rape, but I also recognize how precarious a position I put myself in. We all have a responsibility to care for one another and not exploit others in their most vulnerable moments. It's something I've thought about a lot, and I hope we can do better as a society to prevent situations like this. Story 3. One day I was playing soccer with my friends, and I accidentally kicked the ball into a nearby house's yard. The rule was that whoever kicked the ball had to retrieve it, so I went to get it. The house belonged to an elderly man, about 78 years old, who lived there with his son, daughter-in-law, and their daughter. I called out his name several times, but no one responded. When I knocked on the door, it swung open, so I stepped inside and saw the ball lying right in front of me. As I reached to pick it up, I suddenly heard a woman screaming loudly from one of the bedrooms. It startled me, and I instinctively looked toward the sound. What I saw shocked me. Through the slightly open door, I caught a glimpse of the elderly man engaging in BDSM activities with his granddaughter, who I'd known since we were kids. She was about 20 at the time and was yelling things like, "Hurt me, hurt me," while he carried on aggressively. I panicked and ran as fast as I could, not stopping until I reached home. The next day, I saw them all acting completely normal, as if they were a perfectly functional family. To this day, I've never spoken about what I witnessed. Story 4. I have a friend who has no idea that I figured out he doesn't actually have kids. He's been lying to everyone about it for months, clearly seeking attention. His story is very convincing. He shares vague but emotional details, has a photo of a woman he claims is the mother, and says she's been giving him fake paperwork to prove the kids exist. If his story were true, it would be a case of extortion. But I've been paying close attention, and I've done my own research. I've found enough evidence to know that this woman doesn't exist and that he's been lying the entire time. His stories don't add up, and every time he tells them, they escalate in ways that make even less sense. I couldn't help but investigate further, and the truth is clear. It's all made up. If this ever gets out, it's going to spread like wildfire. He already has a reputation for compulsive lying, and many of his former friends have distanced themselves because of it. This would be the final nail in the coffin for what's left of his social circle. Story 5. I made up a person. When I was in high school, I wanted to seem more popular, so I invented a guy friend. He had an incredibly detailed and interesting backstory. This lie went on for years, well into college. I had the same group of friends, so I couldn't just end the charade. The funny thing is, everyone, my family, my best friend, even my husband, believes they met him at some point. I never actually introduced anyone to this fictional person, but over the years, they all somehow developed their own memories of seeing him. Eventually, I just phased him out by saying we grew apart and lost touch. Even now, people will occasionally ask me for updates about him. I just give vague answers and watch my husband smirk from across the room. He's the only one who knows the truth. I'm so ashamed that I'll never admit it to anyone else. That lie was such a ridiculous thing to let snowball. Story 6. When I was 15, my dad sat me down and told me the real story behind my parents' divorce when I was a kid. My brother and I had lived with our mom, so we only ever heard her version, that dad was an awful alcoholic and she decided to leave him. The truth was more complicated. Yes, my dad was an alcoholic and their marriage wasn't compatible. But he threw himself into work, and during that time, my mom started an affair with my uncle's neighbor. My dad caught them, filed for divorce, and eventually got sober. Now, 12 years later, only my dad and I know the full story. We agreed not to tell my brother because he has deep-rooted emotional issues and wouldn't be able to handle the truth. My mom doesn't know that I know either. It took years in therapy, but I've forgiven her. Story 7. I'm constantly in a depressed state and neglect almost every aspect of my personal life. On paper, I look really successful with a bright future ahead, and I try to present myself as happy and positive to the world. If you ask people who know me, they'd probably say I'm doing great. But the truth is, I cry almost every night over my inability to do simple things like clean my room or reach out to my friends, even though I love them dearly. I get so upset with myself for not being better, but it feels like I just can't. I know I need therapy, but with everything going on in my life, I have no idea how to make that happen. Edit. Wow, I just got back from work, and the love, care, and personal messages I've received have left me in tears. I always thought I was alone in this, that I wasn't worthy of help or love. Reading all these messages filled with well wishes and reminders that things can get better has made me incredibly emotional. I've been reading about telehealth and some therapy apps, so I'm planning to talk to my dad, since I'm on his insurance, about setting up someone to talk to. For everyone else struggling like me, my inbox is open if you ever need someone to talk to. Thank you all for being so kind to me and to each other. You've truly made me feel less alone. Story 8. My mental health has been driving me crazy lately. I don't understand why I can't just get better. I'm in therapy, I'm studying for my bachelor's in psychology, and I have a good understanding of mental illnesses. But I still can't seem to get myself on track. Recently, I've been hitting myself when I feel angry or anxious as a form of stress relief. The other day, I was sitting in my car thinking, and I imagined myself repeatedly banging my head against the window until it was bloody and shattered. I don't know why these thoughts happen. I've only been diagnosed with anxiety, and I haven't told my therapist about these feelings. I'm scared that no one will believe me, or worse, they'll think I'm faking it. So I've just been keeping everything to myself, hoping that my new prescription for anxiety will help and that these thoughts and behaviors will go away. Story 9. When I was in 4th or 5th grade, we had a candy corn counting contest where you had to guess how many were in a big jar. When no one was looking, I carefully peeled the tape off the top, thinking I could count them all or something. That's when I noticed they had written the total on the inside of the lid. Feeling like a genius, I decided to take about 30 of them out, ate the evidence, and submitted my guess as the total minus 35, just so it wouldn't seem too suspicious if I got it exactly right. What I didn't realize was that they weren't going to recount the candy. In the end, someone else won by guessing within 20 of the number written on the lid. So not only did I cheat and sabotage the contest, but I still lost. I've kept that embarrassing moment to myself all these years. Story 10. This isn't a story about a disgusting person, but it does involve a disgusting smell. Back in college, a friend of mine wasn't prepared for an exam. Instead of studying, cramming, or risking failure, he came up with a ridiculous plan. He bought a bulk pack of stink bombs that smelled unbelievably foul, like sulfur and rotten eggs. In the hour before the exam, he went around dropping stink bombs everywhere. In bathrooms, elevators, stairwells, trash cans, and anywhere else he could think of. The smell was so overwhelming that the university ended up closing the building for days, believing there was a serious gas leak. He managed to get an extra week to prepare for the exam because of it. Ironically, I'm pretty sure he still failed. Story 11. During lockdown, my sister had a meltdown because she thought I had stolen her pair of nail clippers, shaped like a foot. I told her truthfully that I also had a pair and that she must have taken mine. The truth is, they actually were hers. About an hour later, I found my own pair. Instead of confessing, I gave hers back and said, "If they mean so much to you, you can keep them." To add to the ruse, I secretly slipped mine into her bag before she went home after lockdown. When she got home, she found both pairs of nail clippers and concluded that the pair she had a meltdown over must have been mine all along. To this day, she believes she was wrong, and I've never corrected her. Story 12. This isn't about me, but about my wife. A few years ago, one of her best friends started dating a guy who immediately set off her shady person radar. The guy claimed he never had a driver's license, but he owned a car that didn't work. He started using her friend's car regularly and even her debit card to pay for gas. Feeling suspicious, my wife paid for a background check on him. It turned out he had a revoked license due to a hit and run, along with multiple arrests for fraud, drug possession, heroin and pills, and other shady activities. Despite this, my wife chose not to say anything at the time because she felt she had crossed a line, and her friend was convinced this guy was the one. Eventually, her friend found out the hard way. He got a moving violation while driving her car and completely drained her savings to buy pills. In hindsight, my wife wishes she had spoken up sooner, as it might have spared her friend a lot of heartache. Story 13. Years ago, my father got fired for trying to sneak money from his employer. He told me he quit for the sake of his mental health. But a few months later, I found the truth. Solid evidence. When I started getting suspicious. He still tells our extended family that he's working, but whenever he's broke and asks them for money, he blames me. He claims it's because he's supporting me, even though I pay my own way. I've even loaned him hundreds of dollars that I know I'll never see again. Thousands when you add in the money my sibling has loaned him. Meanwhile, my family believes his lies and sees me as a selfish, ungrateful child who's draining my father's finances. I've started looking for my own place and have drastically reduced contact with my family because I can't handle their constant disapproval and guilt tripping over something I haven't even done. A few years ago, this dynamic pushed me to the brink of suicide. Now I get bright red stress rashes before family visits because I know it'll be days of hearing how hard his life is because of me. He never defends me or asks them to back off. Instead, he makes it worse by doing exaggerated, hysterical impressions of me having panic attacks. The only thing keeping me sane is that my brother knows the truth. My father still doesn't know I'm aware of the real reason he lost his job, but covering for him is no longer worth sacrificing my mental health. Story 14. No one appreciates me. I have no real friends. The few people who call themselves my friends have told me to kill myself. I've been depressed since I was 12, and I turned 15 just last week. I cried 3 separate times on my birthday. My parents try to do nice things for me and buy me nice stuff, but I always seem ungrateful, which just makes them flip out on me. A year and a half ago, I went to the hospital for suicidal thoughts and depression. But all that happened was a 5-minute talk with someone before they put me in a room with other girls all day, even though I'm a trans man. I've told my parents multiple times that I'm depressed, but they brush it off. When DCF came over, because my dad hurt me, they promised I'd get therapy. That was 10 months ago, and I still haven't gone. Over the past few months, I've started hallucinating. It scares me so much that I hide under my blanket for hours without moving. I have everything I need to end my life, but there's something inside me that keeps stopping me. Some small hope that maybe, just maybe, I'll get better. Story 15. A few years ago, I was in one of the darkest periods of my life. I was seriously considering ending my life within the next few years if things didn't improve. The only thing keeping me grounded was my dog, my best friend, and the one constant in my life. She was the only one I could confide in without seeing tears. While waiting 1.5 months for my surgery and pathology report, her presence kept me sane. The surgery itself was life-changing. It cost an astronomical amount, but my insurance covered almost everything. After the operation, I gained a new perspective on life that I hadn't felt since my time in the infantry as a Marine. The tumor was grape-size, located in my right parietal lobe. When it was discovered, I was told there was a significant chance it was cancerous, that they might not be able to remove it entirely, and that I could end up with partial or total paralysis on my left side. Despite these dire odds, the surgery was a complete success. No complications, no paralysis, and a total resection of the tumor. Even better, the pathology report showed it was benign and low-grade, meaning no chemo or radiation was necessary. My recovery was shockingly smooth. Aside from a few days of headaches and nausea, I felt perfect just 3 weeks after the surgery. My oncologist told me this kind of outcome is incredibly rare and said, "It brightens our entire office's day when we get to give news like this, because most of the time, it isn't good." The experience gave me a profound sense of purpose. I'm now a year away from graduating with a degree in electrical engineering, and I want to use my skills to create technology that helps others and improves medical outcomes like mine. I feel like I've been given a second chance, and I don't want to waste it. I've seen the worst humanity has to offer, but this experience during the pandemic restored my faith. It wasn't just about surviving, it was about finding meaning in a calling in life. I'm determined to make the most of it, not because I feel obligated, but because I want to. For context, I'm not religious, but I do believe this happened for a reason. My outcome was so atypical that it feels like a gift, and I'm committed to paying it forward. Story 16. When I was deployed to Iraq, each platoon was issued a high-tech handheld radio with a specialized program to prevent enemy combatants from listening to our communications. One day, our buddy, who was assigned to carry the radio, realized he had lost it. Instead of owning up to it, our group of friends decided to cover for him by claiming we last saw the lieutenant using it. Word quickly spread, and the higher-ups were furious. The entire company, about 200 of us, Spent 2 weeks tearing apart every truck, storage container, and tent, desperately searching for the missing $30,000 radio. When the search was called off, our supervisors were hit with pay cuts to cover the loss. A few days later, our friend came to us in a panic. He'd found the radio buried under some dirty cloth in his rucksack. We knew the fallout would be catastrophic if the truth came out, especially since the entire company had been punished. So, as loyal friends, we took the radio out into the desert, smashed it to pieces, and spent the next 3 months scattering the fragments all over Iraq. If the truth had come out, it would have destroyed him, and we couldn't let that happen. Story 17. When I was 6 years old, I'm 35 now, I was playing by myself at recess when I saw a classmate who was severely mentally handicapped, apologies if the terminology is outdated, sitting alone in a secluded corner. For some reason, her helper wasn't with her. She was holding a butterscotch pudding cup and seemed to want to show it to me. Or maybe she was asking for help opening it since she was nonverbal. I took the pudding and set it on the ground in front of me. At that moment, her helper appeared in the distance, looking frazzled, likely from trying to find her. When the helper saw me beside the girl, she looked relieved and started walking toward us. Then, for reasons I'll never understand, I locked eyes with the helper and stomped on the pudding cup, crushing it. The helper screamed at me, horrified by what I'd done. I immediately ran away and went back to my house a few blocks from the school. I've done some bad things as an adult. We all have in one way or another, but this one still haunts me. I don't know why I did it, and I don't think I'll ever know. I think about it often, and it's something I'll probably never forgive myself for. Story 18. This is a bit of a long one, but I feel like I need to give you the backstory before I tell you what I did. When I was a kid, we had neighbors I absolutely hated. Their daughter, who was a year or two older than me, bullied me relentlessly. For my birthday that year, I was about 4 or 5, I got a hair dye Barbie that I'd wanted for months. It was my pride and joy. But just a few days later, she hopped the fence into my backyard, snatched my Barbie and the hair dye I was about to play with, and dumped all the dye down my plastic slide. That was the last straw. I was furious and decided I needed to get my revenge. From our bathroom window, you could see the back of their house and their car clearly. At the time, we had a cat litter box in the bathroom. So every time I noticed one of the cats had done their business, I would put on yellow rubber gloves, wrap the poop in toilet paper, and throw it as hard as I could at their house. This went on for about a week. Eventually, my mom and her mom had a heated argument in our front yard. My brother, who's 3 years older than me, got blamed because, of course, a kid my age couldn't possibly have come up with such a plan. I need to add that I didn't get along with my brother growing up. He was pretty rough with me. So part of my plan was to make sure he got the blame too. And it worked. My mom believed he was the culprit for years. It wasn't until a few years ago, when I was home for Christmas, that the incident came up again. My mom casually mentioned it, and I finally confessed that I had been behind the whole thing. We all had a good laugh about it. For the record, don't feel bad for the neighbors. Their whole family was awful. They even put nails on the top of our shared fence to try and hurt our cat's paws. Thankfully, they moved out about a year later. Good riddance. Story 19. Back in elementary school, I was obsessed with collecting Pokemon cards. At the same time, there was this one teacher who seemed just as obsessed with confiscating them for no apparent reason. Even though she was supposed to return them at the end of the day, she didn't know anything about Pokemon cards and rarely checked beyond the design on the back that all the cards shared. Realizing this, I came up with a sneaky plan. I started carrying duplicate cards in my backpack. Whenever someone else brought rare cards to school, ones I didn't have, I'd find a way to make sure the teacher noticed and confiscated them. She'd put them in her desk, and during recess, I'd sneak back into the classroom and swap out their rare cards for my duplicates. I managed to pull this off 3 times without any issues. The kids would complain, but the teacher ignored them because she always returned the same number of cards she confiscated, not realizing they weren't the same cards. Looking back, it was definitely underhanded, but at the time I felt like a genius. Story 20. I once got invited to a party hosted by a merry maid of mine. Picture a scene straight out of Once Were Warriors. It was loud, wild, and you could hear the music and noise from a block away. I went alone, met everyone, and could already hear the commotion in the backyard with a roaring drum fire. As I walked through the open front door, half drunk with a large bottle of beer in my hand, I realized I desperately needed to find the bathroom. While navigating the small house to find my way to the backyard, I spotted the only toilet. Being tipsy, I set my beer bottle on top of the toilet tank to unzip and relieve myself. To my horror, the bottle slid off and fell into the toilet, shattering like a grenade and leaving a huge hole in the porcelain. Water started pouring everywhere. Panicked and knowing this was definitely worthy of a backyard beating, I did what any terrified drunk white boy would do. I bolted out the door as fast as I could, hoping no one noticed me. Then I texted my mate and told him I was having a quiet night at home. Story 21. My father-in-law has been acting inappropriately toward me for the past 5 years. It started after his daughter's destination wedding. Since then, he has exposed himself to me, blown kisses at me, touched himself or groped himself in my direction, and hidden in places where no one can see him except me. He positions himself in spots where he's always in my line of sight or peripheral vision. No one else notices because they're always on their phones. Every time it happens, I want to say something, but I shut down. I've been sully assaulted before, and I'm terrified no one will believe me. Everyone thinks he's this great person, but he's disgusting. I've spent years replaying scenarios in my head, practicing how I'll confront him. I've been rude and made it clear that I don't want to talk to him. He seems to have backed off a bit, but I know I need to confront him. Maybe not today, but I will. I have to, for myself and for my future children. I will never leave my children alone with my in-laws, ever. I've kept this to myself for 5 years. I barely speak to him, don't acknowledge him when we visit, and don't understand how no one has noticed that something is wrong. Posting this makes me nervous, but I needed to let it out. Story 22. I don't think I've ever told this to anyone. Only my mom really knows, and it's probably her biggest regret as a parent. When I was about 10 or 11, I was a very odd kid. I'm now a very odd but functional adult. This was the late 90s and early 2000s, when terms like ADD, which no longer exists as a diagnosis, were often used as a catch-all for kids who didn't behave the way their parents wanted. I was genuinely suicidal at that age. My childhood was full of loss. I watched loved ones and friends die, and my parents' marriage was clearly failing. As an only child, that was incredibly isolating. They sent me to a child psychiatrist who diagnosed me with borderline ADD after a short multiple-choice test. That whole process was a mess, but nothing compared to Brenda. Brenda was someone my mom found in desperation, trying to help me, though she didn't realize what she was signing me up for. I have no idea what Brenda's credentials were, if any, but she operated out of a private medical building filled with various specialists. Her office looked amazing to a kid. Colorful play mats, a rock climbing wall, all the things you'd think were there to make kids feel comfortable. But that couldn't have been further from the truth. That rock climbing wall, it was used to force kids, often unfit or overweight, to climb while she screamed at them for being weak. I only had to do it once, probably because I was rail thin after being prescribed amphetamines by the psychiatrist. Ironically, when they switched me to Wellbutrin a few months later, my issues improved drastically, and I credit that drug with saving my life. The worst part of my visits with Brenda was the food portion. Every visit, she'd choose some kind of food, usually fruit or raw vegetables, and force-feed it to me. Two large men in scrubs would hold me down while she shoved the food in my mouth, yelling things like, This is good food. You want to eat this? I'd be crying, gagging, throwing up, and she'd just keep going. After every visit, I'd come home a wreck. My parents would fight about it. My mom wanted to stop the sessions, but my dad would threaten to leave us, hurt us, or worse. They're still married. I moved back in with them at 27 after my engagement ended, which has brought back a lot of memories. I think I'm sharing all this because tomorrow I have my first real doctor's appointment in 15 years. I'm dealing with a long list of medical and mental health issues, and I feel bad about walking into that office with so many problems. But I'm hoping to get a referral to a psychiatrist and maybe some medication to help control the panic attacks I've been experiencing daily for the past month. If nothing else, it would mean a lot to me if you could just wish me luck. I'm ready to start addressing these things and hopefully find some peace. Story 23. My neighbor is cheating on his wife, and he's also cheating on his mistress. I enjoy sitting on my porch and try not to pay attention, but it's hard to ignore what's happening. I'll see his wife pulling out of the driveway, and not long after, the woman from behind our row of houses crosses the alley to his place. I swear I don't try to watch, but it's like every time I go out to sit or walk my dog, the guy's up to something. It doesn't stop there. On Mondays, a very attractive gay man comes over. Sometimes they even do it on the outdoor screen porch. Honestly, it's wild how busy this guy is. I've kept all of this to myself. I haven't even told my sister or any other neighbors. I would never say anything because I wouldn't want anyone to confront me and accuse me of gossiping. I don't know them very well. The only time we interacted was when they first moved in and needed a jump for their car. I found out then that they were newly married and this was their first house together. I'm old enough to know that these situations are complicated. People often get mad at the person who speaks up, and if you don't, they might be upset that you knew and didn't say anything. Since I don't know them well, I've decided to mind my own business. Still, it feels bad knowing what's going on. Story 24. I adore my girlfriend, but I can't stop thinking about another woman. I already have the ring. My girlfriend is quiet and shy. She's short, maybe 5'2", sweet, soft, and gentle. She tries too hard to be someone else, worries too much about her weight and appearance, and feels jealous of other girls. I love her deeply and have for a long time. But then there's this other woman, her complete opposite. She's tall, full of energy, constantly joking, dancing, and making everyone laugh. She's intelligent and outgoing, the kind of person other women envy. A few months ago, we had an amazing conversation about a shared experience. We both happened to visit the same place at nearly the exact same time, and we spent hours swapping stories and photos. When it was over, I felt confused. I realized I'd never had a conversation like that with my girlfriend. Since then, those thoughts have spiraled. I've started seeing my girlfriend's flaws more clearly. She struggles with sarcasm, received a poor education, and has trouble with certain things. Not because she's unintelligent, but because she wasn't given the tools. I can't stop comparing her to the other woman, and I know that's wrong. This has made me worry about the future. Am I going to be a terrible husband? Will I be able to give my wife the love she deserves, or am I already failing her? Story 25. My uncle had an ongoing affair with his brother-in-law's, Bill's, wife, and it resulted in a scandal that no one else in the family fully understands, except me. Both my uncle and his BL had vasectomies around the same time. Somehow my uncle ended up getting both his wife, my aunt, and his BIL's wife pregnant at the same time. When his BIL saw what happened to my uncle, he assumed his own vasectomy had failed too, and had it redone months later. I pieced all of this together because I lived with my uncle for a few months. He would pay me to leave the house for a few hours and come back at a specific time. One day I came home a little early and saw his Bill's wife leaving the house. That's when everything clicked. That was 17 years ago. Today, the two cousins look almost identical, but people shrug it off because my uncle and his Bill also look alike. The family jokes about how the cousins seem more like brothers, but I know the truth. To this day, I don't think my uncle will ever admit what happened, and I'm pretty sure he has no idea that I know. Story 26. In high school, one of my best friends left to join Job Corps, and it seemed like I was the only one at school who knew about it. I was bummed out because my best friend wasn't around anymore, and I guess I must have looked down in the dumps. Then one day, a girl approached me, offering her condolences, and said she was sorry for my loss. Confused, I just went along with it. Apparently, some people thought my friend had died, though no one seemed to know how. This is where I might have gone too far. She asked how he died, and on the spot I made up a story about him killing himself over a girl from 2 towns away. I have no idea why I did it. It just struck me as funny since he was safe and sound a couple of hours away, and we talked regularly. The story spread quickly, and more people came up to me asking about his death. Every time I'd make up a new cause: choked to death on a meatball sub, hit by an arrow while cleaning one of his many crossbows, killed by his 30 pet snakes, crashed a Ferrari at a charity event for koalas with chlamydia. It got so ridiculous that by the beginning of senior year, I'd heard at least 500 different stories about how he supposedly died, none of which I had actually told anyone. The best part? One day he randomly showed up at school to catch up with the old crew. The look on everyone's faces was priceless. Even though his ghost walked the halls that day, there are still people who believe he died sophomore year. Story 27. This is something I've kept completely hidden, and if anyone ever found out, it would destroy my life. My family would stop loving me, my friends would abandon me, and I honestly don't think I'd be able to keep living. Several years ago, I came to the horrifying realization that I am the worst kind of person imaginable. Against my will, I discovered that I am a P. I hate myself more than words can express. These thoughts invade every second of my consciousness, like a virus I can't get rid of. I don't want them. I wish they would just disappear. I've never broken the law in any way related to this. I've never hurt a child, never planned or attempted to hurt a child, and I would never want to. But these thoughts and urges exist, and I feel powerless to stop them. In every other aspect of my life, I consider myself a good person, but these thoughts have ruined me. They disgust me and make me feel like I've lost who I used to be. I feel like a monster, and the thought that only other monsters like me would ever understand my pain makes me feel even worse. Sometimes the shame and self-loathing make me think about ending my life. I know there's no help for someone like me. Even if there were, who would want to help someone like me? Any mental health professional would be disgusted by what I am. So why bother? The only solution I can see is to end my own life before I ever harm an innocent child. It feels like the only way to ensure I never ruin someone else's life. Story 28. I currently live with my parents, and while they're nice people in many ways, my dad lets me drive out in the country, and my mom takes me to performances I'm in. I know for a fact that my mom is a drug addict. Every morning I wake up to the sound of her flicking a lighter, sniffing, and other noises coming from her bedroom. If you're wondering how I'm sure, it's not just the sounds. Whenever I go into her room, I see paraphernalia, straws, little torch lighters, and other telltale signs. I've confronted her about it multiple times, and every time she promises she'll quit. But she doesn't. She never does. It's been dragging me down for so long, ever since she started this. It all began when my brother decided to crush up his ADH medication, Ritalin, and snort it. He told my mom about it, and she started doing it too. She got hooked. Eventually, she moved on to painkillers. She did get help for the painkillers, but she never stopped snorting Ritalin. Now, fast forward about 10 years and nothing has changed. My mom is still using drugs. I miss when she was sober. I really, really miss it. But I've learned that life is like this sometimes. You have no control. You're just along for the ride. As for me, I've made it my goal to stay as far away from drugs as I possibly can. I can control my own life, but unfortunately, I can't control my mom's. Story 29. My husband's best friend has been staying with us for a while. My marriage has been rocky for about a year. Kind of on again, off again. We've been trying to work things out though, and I really want things to get better. Recently, this friend has been making inappropriate comments. Yesterday, he told me he'd love to wear my thighs as a face mask. I ended the conversation immediately, but now I'm afraid to tell my husband about it. Last year when we were separated, I had a brief fling with his friend's older brother. It's been a major source of tension between my husband and me ever since. I'm terrified that if I tell him what his best friend said, he'll lose it and everything we've been working so hard to rebuild will fall apart. The friend is moving out in a couple of weeks, so I've been debating whether or not to wait it out. But I know I need to be honest. Our new relationship is built on trust, communication, and respect. And hiding this would go against all of that. I've made up my mind. I'm going to tell my husband right now before I lose my nerve. He deserves to know. Story 30. When I was 19, I was raped by an older man in his 50s. It happened after I blacked out drunk at a party. I guess he took me elsewhere while I was passed out. I woke up with my pants halfway down and confronted him, asking if he had had his with me. He said yes. I was furious. Not only was I in no position to consent, but I'm also a lesbian. I demanded he order me a $50 Uber home immediately, or I'd call the police right then and there. He did, and I left. When I got home, I was devastated. I went to the hospital to report what happened, get tested, and start therapy. But I ultimately decided not to pursue charges. The thought of going through the lengthy legal process and having to see him again, or having my name tied to his, was unbearable. The most disturbing part of this for me is what happened afterward. I can't stop feeling turned on by the thought of something like this happening again. It's a recurring thought almost daily, and it makes me feel so ashamed. I guess it's some twisted reaction to the trauma, but I have no idea how to deal with it. I've never told anyone I know about this, not even my therapist, and I don't think I could bring myself to. It's a secret I've kept to myself, and I don't know how to move forward. Story 31. In college, I had an incident with a cyclist that still haunts me. While driving, a guy on a bike turned into my car and hit the back end. It wasn't my fault. He just misjudged and wiped out completely. I immediately pulled over and saw blood on the road. But when I looked around, the cyclist was nowhere to be found. His bike was there, and some bystanders were just as confused as I was because he had seemingly vanished. I stood around for about 30 minutes, unsure of what to do. I was already late for work and didn't know how to handle the situation. I considered calling the police but felt stuck. How do you report something when the person involved isn't there? Eventually, I got back in my car and left. To this day, I feel guilty, like I was involved in a hit and run, even though I wasn't the one who was hit and I wasn't the one who ran. My two theories are the cyclist may have been undocumented or in some other situation where he didn't want to deal with the police or hospital, so he ran away. He realized it was his fault since the damage was to the back of my car and didn't want to deal with the consequences, even though I think legally the driver's often considered at fault regardless. I still don't know what happened to him or if he was okay. It weighs on me to this day, even though I didn't feel like I did anything wrong in the moment. It's hard not to feel like I abandoned the situation. Story 32. I try to act happy for my kids when I can, keep my marriage going, and help others when they need it, but inside I'm drowning. There's always something that needs to be done at home. One thing after another, never ending. My kids have health problems. My own health isn't great. And I'm completely overwhelmed, exhausted, and depressed. It's like the weight of everything has paralyzed me, and I end up doing nothing. I love my kids more than anything, and it crushed me the other day when I had an intrusive thought I didn't want. I was scrolling through AskReddit, and someone asked what 3 words you'd say if you could go back in time and talk to yourself. Without even thinking, my brain immediately came up with, "Don't have kids." I broke down. That's not how I really feel. It's not at all what I choose. I love my kids with all my heart, but I hate that my life has gone so far off course that my brain would suggest that as a way to protect myself from the pain, stress, and exhaustion. I'll never tell my wife or kids or anyone else about it because it's not truly how I feel. But it's not the first time thoughts like this have come up, and that scares me. I feel completely stuck in an awful position, and I don't know how to get out. Story 33. I lied my way through graduating senior year. I chose to do online schooling for my last year of high school, thinking it would be easier to complete my work at home. It also gave me the flexibility to work more hours and pay off my car. But working so much left me with little to no motivation to do my schoolwork. Most days I'd just come home to eat and sleep. About halfway through the year, I realized I'd barely done any of the work I needed to graduate. At that point, I basically gave up. I managed to convince my parents that I was doing great and passing all my classes with flying colors. They had no idea. At the end of the school year, the head of the online program called me and asked why I hadn't done my work, explaining that I wouldn't be able to graduate. I panicked and made up an elaborate lie, claiming their system must have messed up because I had supposedly completed everything. I kept up the lie with enough persistence that they eventually believed me. A week later, I walked across the stage at graduation. Honestly, I don't feel guilty about it at all. Story 34. I think I might have killed someone. It happened years ago when I went to a frat party to keep an eye on my friends who had a tendency to do reckless things like getting strangers' names tattooed on their bodies, which, yes, actually happened once. I wasn't there to party. I was just sipping apple juice mixed with a little alcohol in the corner, trying to stay out of trouble. At some point, I noticed a shiny baseball bat among all the chaos. Curious, I picked it up, intending to find its owner, but nature called, so I went to the bathroom instead. When I came out, despite the loud music, I heard a woman screaming. Normally, at a frat party, I might not have thought much of it, but she was screaming, "Help me! Please!" with absolute desperation. I followed the sound, still holding the baseball bat, and walked into a room where I found a half-naked girl with blood on her face. A large guy was on top of her, trying to fully undress her. Without thinking, I swung the bat at his head. The girl quickly hid behind me as the man tried to get up. I hit him again, harder this time, and he fell into a small pool of blood. The woman, now hurriedly putting on her dress, grabbed the bat from me and hit him twice more. Just to be sure, we left the party locking the door behind us. No one seemed to notice what had happened, and the bloodied bat remained hidden. Years later, I ran into that same woman. She told me that after the incident, she had confessed what happened to her parents, and they moved away to start fresh. She hadn't heard anything more about the guy until months later, when a friend mentioned that the man who had been stalking her, our attacker, was in a coma. She didn't know if he ever woke up or what happened after that, as she had cut all ties with people from that time. I've thought about it so many times since then. Did he survive? Did I kill him? I still don't know, but the memory of that night, the sounds, the blood, and the uncertainty of it all have stuck with me. Story 35. My parents divorced when I was young, and I ended up living with my mom, since my dad was always on the road for work. My mom used to tell me that my dad didn't care enough to spend time with us, but whenever he did see us, he seemed genuinely happy. Still, her words stuck with me for a long time. Then my mom got a new boyfriend, who eventually became her husband. He brought 3 more kids into the family, and I really tried to love them, like real siblings. But it always felt like he was trying to prove his kids were better than me. He constantly made rude little comments, always talking about how his daughter was smarter and prettier than I was. When I tried to tell my mom about it, she would just defend him and dismiss my feelings. After I went to college, I started seeing my dad more often whenever he was in town. That's when I found out my mom had been lying to him for years. She would tell him I had sports practice or other activities whenever he was nearby, so he wouldn't be able to see me. When the pandemic hit and the dorms closed, I decided to move back to my dad's house instead of hers. I didn't tell her. I just told her I got an apartment and was staying up there. Even though my dad is still on the road a lot, I see him now more than I ever did growing up. When my mom eventually found out where I was, she threatened to call the police. I'm not sure if she actually did, but considering I'm 21 and living here of my own free will, I imagine the police told her there was nothing they could do if she even followed through with the threat. Living with my dad now feels like I've regained a part of my life that I missed out on for so many years. It's bittersweet, but I'm grateful for the time we have together. Story 37. When I was 14, my sister and I went on holiday with our parents to Barcelona. At some point, we split off from them to enjoy the sights on our own, something that, in hindsight, probably wasn't the best idea. We were near Gracia, I think, though it's been 13 years. So my memory may be a little off, and we decided we needed to use the bathroom. My sister went into the women's restroom, and I went into the men's. A few seconds after I started, my sister came to the entrance of the men's restroom, whispering at me to hurry up. At first I brushed her off, but she was insistent, saying, "Please, let's go." Something about her urgency made me uneasy, so I asked her what was wrong. She whispered, "There's a guy." I didn't understand what she meant, so she added, "I think he's dead." I was skeptical but curious, so I peeked into the women's restroom, half expecting to see a random woman who'd yell at me for looking. Instead, there was a grown man sprawled on the floor, motionless. The room reeked of urine and feces, and his jeans were visibly stained. My sister and I panicked. We left quickly and decided not to tell our parents. We were afraid they'd stay with us for the rest of the trip, be angry at how we handled the situation, or act irrationally, since they were often drunk during the holiday. For years, I've wondered if telling someone could have helped him. Maybe he wasn't dead, just unconscious. Maybe someone could have done something. But at the time, all we could think about was getting away. Looking back, I realized we were just kids trying to navigate a situation that no child should have to face. But the thought of that man alone, sprawled on the floor of a women's restroom, smelling of urine and feces, has stuck with me ever since.